All right. Well, hello, good morning, everyone. I am Kyle Nabors. I am the sports editor for ShawLocal.com, and with me is Sean Hammond, our Bears beat reporter for ShawLocal.com. And of course, anyone tuning in right now is immediately wondering, well, where's Hub Arkush? And really, that's the question that all of us are asking right now. Well, Sean and I are asking.
All two of us.
All two of us. No reason to believe anything's wrong. As everyone probably knows, is that a bit of a rough week and probably doesn't realize what day it is at this point. But still waiting to hear from Hub. Just had actually texted Arthur to make sure that everything was okay. So waiting to hear back, but we don't want to keep everyone waiting any longer. So we're going to get going. Hopefully Hub will jump in here at some point during the show. Happy to have everyone here with us. See a bunch of usuals already in the chat today. If you're here to give Hub a hard time, just hang on. He should be along at some point. But like I said, we're going to go ahead and get started. We got some questions in there, Sean, as we go into week 18 between the Bears and the Vikings. And really, no one's really focused very much on the Minnesota Vikings at this point. But before we do get into some front end or front office talk, which I already see questions in there from Kawhi and Hairless Yoda, or maybe not Kawhi. I think the big news yesterday, of course, was Justin Fields going on the COVID-19 list. Pretty disappointing for anyone that wanted one more chance to check him out.
Yeah, this game was already a bit of an afterthought. Just it feels like the last couple of weeks have been, we're kind of been in this holding pattern, waiting to get the big news, the off-season news that we're waiting for probably on Monday, at least sometime next week. And in that process, these games haven't really mattered. They've been a little bit of an afterthought. And now Justin Fields goes on the COVID list yesterday, and it's only more so of an afterthought. I mean, it would have been really nice to see Justin Fields get out there and get one more game. Obviously, you don't want him to, you don't like the injury risk at this point in a lost season. But I personally think it's still worth it to get him out there and get him some snaps, hopefully end on a good note. There is a chance. He has told us in the past that he is vaccinated, so there is a chance that he could test out of it. But I think at this point the chances are pretty slim. He'd have to, one, be symptom free, and two, test out of it before Saturday when they fly out to Minnesota.
Yeah, it's a pretty narrow window, and I mean, you brought it up. Like, I have no reason to believe that Justin Fields missing this game and kind of having a rough end to the year for him is going to affect him mentally. But I mean, it can't hurt to go out on a high note. You know what I mean? Like, it would just feel better probably for him, for the organization, and clearly for fans, just to have, one good game to kind of savor when we go into this, 9 months without regular season NFL football.
Yeah. And I really do think he would have, I feel like playing a team for the second time, as we kind of saw with that Packers performance, that's valuable. He has that film from the last time they played the Vikings just a couple of weeks ago. Certainly,
and they're a lot healthier
from that. Yeah, and they're a lot healthier as a team than they were that first time.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's gonna be tight to have any chance for him to play this weekend. Anything else? Any players that you really want to see in this game?
Well, I just continue to want to see those young guys. We didn't see as much of, I should say that fourth quarter against the Giants, we did get to see a lot of those guys. Tevin Jenkins was in there a little bit because of the margin, the 29-3 win over the Giants. So I just want to see those young guys. I want to see the Tevin Jenkins, who I don't know that we're necessarily going to see if it's a close game. Thomas Graham, you want to keep seeing improvements from some of those rookies and those second-year players, just to give yourself, you need to know what you have in them, and you want those good feelings going into the offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about front office here. Brad Biggs had a report this morning that it appears, Brad Biggs from the Chicago Tribune. I'm sure everyone knows that, but I do want to make sure to give proper credit to Brad, that it appears that Ryan Pace could be safe, that he could be moving to a new position within the structure of the Bears, which would kind of lead you to believe that, we've speculated a lot that, that he could move into a new position, a new GM could be in, or he was kind of like, the president of football operations. Ted Phillips kind of focuses more on the financial side, which is frankly what he's been good at over the years. And we go in here, I believe, they had a question from Hairless Yoda, which was addressed to Hub. But Hub, you mentioned on 670 The Score that you believe it is trending towards Pace staying with the organization. Do you think he'll stay in his position or be moved into a higher role? Based on Brad's report and kind of the way we were feeling, Sean, it does seem to be heading that way.
Yeah, it certainly seems like that's a legitimate possibility. We won't know for sure until we hear it from George McCaskey himself, which hopefully is in the near future. But I don't know that it comes down to what this process looks like. Who, if you have two guys, how are they making these decisions? Because at the end of the day, there has to be somebody with that final say on a particular move, whether you're talking about a trade or a free agent or whatever, a draft pick. So you can add guys to the front office, but I think there needs to be, first of all, who's gonna want to come in and work with Ryan Pace. That's probably a very specific type of person who's trying to do that, right?
I think that's a really fair point because, Ryan Pace, you move him to a new role, you can't assume he's just going to be hands off in terms of roster construction. This is, it's his baby. Whether you believe he's done a good job with it or not, I'm sure he thinks he's done it. And he wants to see that work continued. So, if Ryan Pace is promoted to football operations and, the thing is to bring in a general manager below him, I think it's a very fair point to wonder who would want to do that. And how that would be structured.
And most prospective GMs or GM candidates out there right now would probably, if they have the chance to work in a situation like that versus, say, another team's offering them to be the guy, you're going to take the chance to be the guy more likely than not.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, and I don't believe, I don't think anything has been finalized. Looking at the way it's kind of been presented, if they knew for sure Ryan Pace was going to be here this year, I think that probably, or this coming year, I think that probably means they would have already made the decision to move on from Matt Nagy. There would have been no reason not to. So the fact that they haven't done that means I think they're still evaluating their front office as well. Could be reading into that. Maybe, the other side of that coin is maybe we're just completely wrong. Hub wrote a column, I believe, at the beginning of the week. Maybe it was the end of last week, talking about, are we completely 100% sure that, Matt Nagy's going to be fired? And it would be really, really, really hard to defend at this point. And I think there's like a 2% chance of that happening. But we don't know what the Bears are thinking. We got a question in there about, is it normal for people like George McCaskey and Ryan Pace to really only talk once or twice a year? We'll get to that in a second. But we haven't heard from those guys since January 2021, when George McCaskey defined it as progress and didn't actually say what progress was. So we don't really know what the Bears are using to evaluate these guys.
No, we don't. And I thought that's part of another reason why it's kind of a bummer that Justin Fields isn't playing, because, depends, whose side you're on, I guess. But if you're Matt Nagy and you come out and win on Sunday and Justin Fields looks good and you're 7-10, that's certainly, you can certainly use that as your fuel for why you should keep your job. Now, of course, Justin Fields probably isn't going to play, so that throws that into further, disarray, I guess. And yeah, we don't hear from McCaskey. We haven't heard from him in almost a year. So it's hard to know what exactly their thinking is. And, I think it's entirely possible. I think you bring up a really good point that, with this hiring window for a coach, if Ryan Pace was going to be, if they knew for certain Ryan Pace is our guy, he's the guy who's going to run the ship, then why wouldn't you have moved on from Matt Nagy and gotten that interview process going? Because you have this window. And yes, it's just speculation, but maybe that's an indication that they're thinking of broader changes. They want to bring in a second voice, or they want to bring in a new voice to go through that process, either with Ryan or if Ryan is gone. But until we hear from George McCaskey, we're all just guessing. And trying to do our best to figure out what exactly this situation is going to look like next week.
All right. Well, the question was addressed to Hub, and we do have Hub with us now, so I'm going to bring him in here and get his thoughts. Hub, good morning, sir.
There he is.
Hey guys, how you doing? I do apologize. I've had an interesting week, and
I said at the top, we weren't sure where you were, but at this point, I was not sure if you knew what day of the week it even was. So, no worries. Glad to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure where I am actually. No, I'm kidding. There's been a few people calling, a few people dialing, just trying to keep up. It seems like everything's been a little weird. I've heard the expression going viral. I never really expected it to happen. And I don't want to interrupt wherever we were at the broadcast, but I'm guessing most of the folks here are aware of what happened. And I would hope at this point that you've gone to shawlocal.com. I've posted the best explanation and apology that I can. And I'm in a situation where can't really talk about it too much more other than that, because that's what caused the problem in the first place. So I would say here on the podcast what I've said every chance I get, that I really apologize to the Associated Press and all of my fellow voters. The one thing they ask us is to not talk about our votes, and I made that mistake on a talk radio station. And then I made it worse by getting a little upset in a conversation and saying some things that I shouldn't have said about Aaron Rodgers, talking about the name calling, which was absolutely inappropriate, and have done my best to try and apologize to him as well for that. There is no excuse. There's no explanation. I was wrong. I own it. And, hope that everybody will understand that I know I was wrong and that I own it. Whether they want to forgive me or not, that's going to be up to them. As far as the topic of the whole subject, which is the MVP voting and who should be the MVP, once the award is announced, if anybody's interested, we'll certainly revisit it. We'll certainly discuss that as best we can, but it's just not a conversation I can have right now. So I hope everybody understands. I'm sure you guys have been in good hands with Kyle and Sean. So where were we, guys? I apologize for the interruption.
No, so we were talking, I don't know if you've seen it this morning yet, that Brad Biggs had a piece out essentially saying that Ryan Pace is safe within the organization, but it appears that he actually may be promoted or put into a role and someone else brought in, kind of, that we've speculated could be a possibility, Hub. Well, I know guys, that's a lot to process if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, no, I haven't. I've been fending off other folks, to be honest with you. But I think I've been. Brad's the best, and while until this stuff is confirmed, we never know. But if Brad's reporting it, there is a very good chance that it's absolutely true or extremely close to what he is reporting. As you guys know, I've been pretty much reporting. My sources are telling me the same thing for a few weeks now, and so the part about Ryan Pace staying, that would not surprise me at all. We've also speculated or assumed that the best way for the McCaskies to sell that to Bears Nation would be if it was at least with change and possibly with somebody else to assist the football operation. So I think it makes sense. I think it probably would be a good move, depending on how it's done and what the chain of command is. I mean, when you say, I think you said that Brad's report suggests that Ryan is being promoted.
Maybe promoted is the wrong word. Essentially, I believe it was phrased in a way. Sean, do you have it up? I don't know.
I can get it up here in a second. I did earlier.
Yeah, promoted might not be the right word, but essentially someone else brought in. But it was phrased in a way that I don't think it's the Bears are like slapping Ryan down, telling him he's done a terrible job. They just want to reorganize it, and that's a way to do it. But I brought up the point, Hub, and I want your input on it here. Is I have a hard time, though, believing that they've already settled on whether that's Ryan coming back or a new structure, because if they had already put that in place, if we kind of talked about a little bit last week, was there, then you probably should have made the move to let Matt Nagy go a couple weeks ago. If you knew what your front office structure was, there was no reason not to get a head start.
Well, Yes and no. It could be that they've come to this conclusion during the course of the last couple of weeks. It could be that they're still working it out. Again, Kyle, I'm not arguing. I'm not saying yes or no, but I think the whole 2-week thing and the Head Start thing is a waste of time. It was done as an adjunct to trying to make improvements in the Rooney Rule, which is to create more opportunities for more minority candidates. It was also done to give an advantage to coaches, assistant coaches on teams preparing for the playoffs. All that makes sense. But the process itself doesn't, like you said, maybe it gives you a head start. But as I think we described last week here on the podcast, is this head start allows you, with the permission of a team a guy is working for that may or may not be given, to do a virtual interview that cannot exceed 2 hours. And so basically, when they do these interviews, when you do sit down with a candidate for a GM job, a head coach job, you come in, the first hour or two is about the pleasantries anyway, and so it's not like you accomplish that much. You're not going to convince somebody that they should take your job if they want to wait and see what else is available. And you're probably not going to do enough to screw up any opportunity to hire somebody and lose them. So I'm not saying that there isn't anything good about it, but I don't think it puts you at any tremendous disadvantage either. I think, Kyle, you indicated that Brad also may have had a name or may have reported who this person could be.
No, I don't think.
I got it up here. Just paraphrasing here. This is exactly what you've been reporting, Hub, for a couple of weeks here. There's an undercurrent of discussion among folks around the league, with speculation General Manager Ryan Pace will remain employed. League sources have said for some time. Word is Pace will find his way to make it to an 8th season with the organization, and that buzz has only amplified the last 2 weeks, is what he says.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's consistent with what we've been reporting. And I know Brad's been reporting it too. This isn't a contest. It's when you have sources, half of it is protecting your sources, and the other half is you don't know who else they're talking to. It could even be that we're talking to some of the same people. That I really don't know. And it doesn't make us right. I mean, it isn't Black Monday yet. It isn't after the Vikings game. The one thing that the Bears do, or at least have done for as long as George McCaskey has been the chairman, and actually well before that, is immediately following the season, they sit down, they have meetings, they evaluate, they have discussions. Everybody is heard, and then they move forward. I thought it was interesting that I don't know if you guys talked about this before I joined, but there was the Boomer Esiason reports early this week that, according to his sources, that Matt had already been told that he was going to be let go, and we asked Matt about that specifically on Wednesday, and he was definitive and somewhat defiant. And whatever Matt Nagy is, he is honest. I mean, he has stood there with class and dignity, and I've always found him to be straightforward with us. And
so that's the second time one of these reports has come from outside the Bears beat too. And there are some of the best writers, NFL reporters in the nation within that Bears beat room. And I would find it shocking, essentially at this point, if at this close to the end of the season, if it still hasn't come from someone within that room, I have a hard time believing it at this point.
Yeah, well, and again, I think we all, Sean, you can speak to this. You're there with me every day. I mean, it doesn't matter that much. I mean, I don't think there's anybody at this point who believes Matt's going to be able to stay. It's I wrote another column I can't remember what day it is anymore. It was either earlier this week or late last week about, the one possibility that maybe he could. And immediately, you take heat on social media for that, because how can you say that? It was how it could happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I hate every time I have to say it, because I can't stand treating these people like dead man walking, but it's impossible to figure out how. Well, it's not impossible, but I mean, it would be really difficult to understand how George McCaskey would sell that based on, forget what people have said, who cares, but it's based on the performance of the team over the last few weeks and where the offense is at, and his own, parameters that he set up at the beginning of the season. That you need to see progress. Could anybody argue that where the Bears are at right now is progress from where they ended last season? And so, whether Matt's been told or not, and who gets to report it first, I mean, to me, that has always been so overrated. I guess the slogan that I think that I try and use is other people can get it first. We want to get it right. And so, when it's official, we'll announce it. And it's not unreasonable to talk about it now. It's our jobs. And our job is also to analyze. And I think the three of us all agree it's going to happen. And why, people need to know now instead of last Wednesday or next Tuesday, I'm not really sure.
So we have a question in here, Hub, that I think is a good one to address. It was pointed or addressed to you. I'll let you start because you definitely have the best history with the team and kind of know the lay of the land in terms of how things have been communicated over the years.
Is it unusual for a GM? I'm sorry, it's from Jeff. And Jeff, thank you for checking in with us. Hub, is it unusual for a GM or owner of an NFL team to be completely silent for an entire calendar year like McCaskey and Pace do? I'm not counting the team-friendly interviews that Pace does on BBM. Well, I agree with you. You can't count Ryan's radio time. Those are not, I mean, no offense to Jeff or whoever he's on with, but those aren't interviews. Those are radio appearances. There's a difference. I guess you technically would call them interviews. The media doesn't get to question him, I guess would be the point. And I will tell you, it's not at all unusual for an owner. Most owners don't speak a lot. I mean, Jerry Jones is the exception because his ego is bigger than the state of Texas, but there's a few others that you hear from every once in a while. Some owners you never hear from. Some owners you can go more than a year, hearing from. There's others who, speak once in a while on different things. But in the general manager category, it's not unusual. There's other GMs who don't like to speak as well. It is not accurate that Ryan doesn't talk. There's I think it's 5. I can't remember if it's 4 or 5 designated pressers that we get every year. Ryan will talk immediately following the season. Ryan will talk at the combine. Ryan will have a press conference prior to the draft. He will then talk during and after the draft. And it used to be just those 4 times. And then through some diligent work from the Pro Football Writers Association and meetings with the Bears media relations people and Ryan, we were able to convince him, I think it was just 3 years ago, to at least talk to us Labor Day immediately following the final cut. Up until a couple of years ago, his first 4 years here, he didn't talk after the free agency period until the end of the season. I mean, I've bumped into Ryan, I think, a couple times. I bumped into him at Lambeau in Green Bay a couple of weeks ago, and we exchanged pleasantries. I don't try and interview him because, I know. And by the way, if I did ask him a question, he would politely say, now's not the time, or I don't want to talk without the group. You can text him, you can call him, you can ask a question. He's going to defer. It's his policy, right or wrong. He believes that his being visible takes the focus away from the coaches and the players. And he and Matt are pretty genuine when they talk about that collaboration and how they expect it to work. And the way they've set it up, guys, is that, Ryan has control of the hiring and firing process, the scouting process, the draft, and the 90-man roster. Ryan puts together the 90-man group that goes to training camp in the summer. And then Ryan is also allowed to cut down to 53. Not allowed to. Ryan oversees that. I mean, him and Matt work on that together, obviously. It's not something he does without him. But if there needs to be a final decision to get to 53, that's going to be Ryan's. Once they've got to 53, then it's Matt's. And then Ryan doesn't get involved. They've told us over and over that's how they work. And I think, guys, he views his not speaking up about it during the season as his, keeping that commitment.
I wanted to go back, Hub. I've now been through this 3 general managers in terms of my professional career. It came in at the end of Jerry Angelo, went through the short tenure of Phil Emery. I don't particularly remember either of those guys having a lot of pressers either. Like, I don't think this is a particularly new trend with the Bears. I do think they were more accessible, but I don't think significantly more accessible than Ryan Pace.
Well, guys, it's a new world, and yeah. I don't want to say since before you were born, but it feels like that sometimes because even though it's only changed in the last 10, 15 years and radically almost daily in the last 4 or 5 years, I will say one thing that is an absolute fact, and then one thing that is my opinion, and people can disagree or not. It is because of social media. That's a fact. I believe
Teams are controlling their message a lot more. Yeah, I think you're right there because they can get
Well,
on social media.
those are two different things, though.
Okay.
Because teams also are in the media business themselves.
Yeah.
And they now own their own. The Bears have their own broadcast facility, their own TV and radio shows. Now, they've actually been fairly careful about that, guys, because they do know that this is supposed to be a democracy with a free press, and they have not, for the most part, broken stories or news on their own that the press did not get access to at the same time. But they do a lot of in-house programming. They do videos for their website. They do their own TV shows. They certainly have better access. Well, we just talked about one of those issues. Ryan does appear on their pregame radio show every week, but doesn't talk to us. So you do have that. But the bigger issue is really social media. And as I said, social media has changed the way we all do business. That's a fact. The part that I will add, I also think that it's ruined it, and it's ruining everything in our lives, because it puts us in this place where you don't have to be a reporter to have an opinion. You don't have to do any reason. I mean, if you go, I don't spend, you guys know this because it's become part of your problem. I don't spend much time on social media. I can't stand it. And it's not at times like this, when I'm a focal point. That's actually, I don't want to digress here, but one of the reasons this hasn't been as bad a week for me as people think is because I just don't look at most of it, and I never do, and it doesn't mean it's not happening out there, but it's not impacting me. Unfortunately, it impacts, friends and associates and family sometimes, but, I wish that it didn't exist. My point here, though, is that anything and everything they say is taken and parsed and analyzed, and opinions are offered. I mean, there are at least half a dozen people on Twitter who fancy themselves or call themselves Bears analysts, who report on things, who have podcasts and websites, who have never been in Hallis Hall when we were allowed to go, never been to a press conference, never asked a question themselves, claim to have sources, have never talked to me. I would be a source, I would think, for somebody like that. And I'm not singling anybody out, and you make of them what you would like. But when you're dealing with that, when people don't care about the facts and getting the information, are going to report it anyway, then these guys are going to be a lot more careful about what they are going to say and what they're going to do. And it makes the job impossible at times. Now, I'm not complaining that my job is hard. It's the job, and I'll do what I have to do. Sean, I'm really curious, as someone newer to it, for your opinion on this. I think Ryan does himself no favors. To get back to the initial point, he should speak more. I think it would help himself. I think it would help Matt. I think it would help everybody, but he chooses not to. And I know that this is one of the reasons, is because they have been put in a no-win situation where you're not going to judge them on what they say anyway. Not you, but I mean, some of the people who are claiming to have opinions of value. So that's the media world we're working in right now. And Sean, I'm really curious to hear what you would say about it.
I think that goes both ways, because the fact that we don't hear from him, whether he talks or not, people are going to speculate. They're going to look at the things he says and overanalyze it, or they're going to look at what he's not saying and overanalyze that. Here's my thing with this whole topic of discussion is I understand. Yeah, we actually do hear from Ryan Pace 4 or 5 times a year. The misconception comes when we're talking about during the season. We don't hear from him during the season, and whether that's, he can have whatever opinion he wants on that. Whether he thinks that that's, he doesn't want to pull the attention away from the team. My thing, though, is, okay, if a baseball GM can speak every 2 to 3 weeks during the season, why is it any different for an NFL general manager? I don't know what you think, Kyle.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, I wish he spoke more. I mean, it's just been a trend overall. I talked about when I first started, it was 2011, coming out of the lockout. And at that time, Hub, as you can recall, obviously, you'd get done with a practice and you'd walk up to, as I was telling Sean before we jumped on, you'd walk up to any player you want coming off the field and ask them, hey, can we talk? And sometimes they'd be like, yeah, we'll talk right now. Or they'd say, hey, meet me over at the lunchroom. We'll talk after I eat. Like, that type of access really across the league has gone away. It's just, it's changed a lot. And it doesn't surprise me that someone that Ryan Pace, who clearly doesn't want to be out in front of the media a lot to begin with. Those are guys that, they're going to take advantage of the more structured and limited access.
And to go back to the baseball thing too, I mean, when Rick Hahn with the White Sox, you can not like what he's saying, but when he comes out and explains why he did what he did or why they made this or that move, you get at least a window into his thinking, and on some level that's going to make sense for why they did X or Y move.
Yeah,
I feel like.
Sorry, I didn't answer the initial question. If you want, let me just get back to that. And one quick point though on baseball. Keep in mind that there's 10 times as many games, and so they probably should talk 10 times as often. Or I don't know if that's a fair equivalency or not, but I do think that that's one minor point. When Jerry Angelo was the GM, now it was a little different because I was also the Bears radio color commentator and part of the radio network. I never worked for the team. That is a misconception that people have. I was always hired by the radio station. The team just had approval of my employment. But I kind of was part of the team, and we had free reign of Hallis Hall. I mean, I went wherever I want. If I wanted to talk to Jerry, I went up and knocked on his door, and we also watched all of practice. We were on the field together all day long. We couldn't go on the field, but we roamed the sidelines, and everybody was one big group, and that started to change, during his tenure. But I also knew Jerry well before he was hired, and we actually had mutual friends, so it was a very different situation. And Jerry didn't speak as often as Phil Emery did. Phil really, when he came in, he did something we'd never seen before. His first year, and we were already in Bourbonnais at the point, is he arranged a breakfast with each of us on the beat for just a one-on-one, and this is in training camp, and did it each year, not just the first year, but started it in the first year. And the first thing he did was give you his cell number, if you ever have a question. And then one thing that both Jerry and Phil did is a couple times during the year when we were on the road to try and make sure that it was the beat guys and to be able to control it and restrict it to just Bears beat guys, we'd have a visit about an hour before a game somewhere in the press box, sometimes, a couple times a year. So they felt that I think correctly, it was in their best interest to control their own message and to do it in such a way that it was, with the right people who deserved it because they were doing the job and doing the work. And that was how they handled it. Now, somewhere during the Phil Emery era and the arrival of Ryan and today, this has all changed so dramatically, with social media. And as I say, at the end of the day, and by the way, guys, I think I started this by saying, I think Ryan does himself no favor by not speaking more. I think he should speak more. This isn't, here's the problem with everything is that as soon as you say something, it's either right or wrong. People want to debate it. You're no, this is just, you asked the question. This is my opinion. Yes, he should speak more, but I fully understand in one respect why he doesn't, because he is guaranteed that whether he speaks or not, his message isn't going to get through clearly to a lot of people who feel that their opinion of his message is more important than his message, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. I'm going to throw a question up here quick. One, because it made me chuckle, but two, because I need clarification. Besides evil twin Kyle, this isn't evil twin Kyle. This is just me being too lazy to shave. What would be a 2022 surprise from the Bears after the season? And I'm throwing that up there because, Alan, if you can follow up with me there, because are you talking about after, when you say 2022, are you talking about after this season or after the 2022 season? Because I got two different answers for you depending on that. So let us know. But we had some questions about Matt Nagy and the coaching situation. I'm going to go with the most recent one here from Gary Ross. And it's, if Pace stays, what level of coach can we get? And I do think that is something that a lot of people are going to wonder. If you do bring Ryan Pace back, does it affect the coaching search? Does it make some coaches a little more wary about accepting a job with the Bears? Hub?
The answer is you can get the best coach in the NFL if Ryan and whoever he's working with evaluates him properly. I mean, there's no restrictions. See, here's an example of, well, it's not an example of anything, but the question assumes that a good coach isn't going to want to work with Ryan. I think that's what the question assumes, is that, well, Ryan can't get a good coach. No, that's ridiculous. I mean, he is respected in the industry, that I know. everybody who works in the industry, just like everybody who works in our industry, there are opinions about them depending on who you talk to. But these 32 jobs are as rare as they come in a business that tens of thousands of people want to be in. This job is considered one of the 4 or 5 best jobs in professional sports. My Lord, it's the Chicago Bears. Guys don't come to this thinking, oh, the McCaskies are bad owners, or they can't ever get a quarterback or whatever. The guys coming in to apply for these jobs think they can be the next Bill Belichick, and they know how hard it is to get a chance to do that. So unless there is interference at the business level, at the financial level, if there are strings put on the level of control, well, then you can't get the best coach. But we don't have any reason to believe that Ryan Pace is doing that, or that Ryan Pace would be the one who did it if it did. So retaining Ryan Pace has no impact whatsoever, Sean, from where I sit, on the quality of coach they can hire.
I think there's a small consideration, a small percentage of people who maybe would be worried, given that if you don't know, do you want to go work for a GM who could be fired next year? But
if you're a veteran coach, like, that's in a good position, I'm thinking about Harbaugh up at Michigan, like maybe that, but like for most coaches,
most coaches, I don't think it's going to
matter. There's only 32 jobs, as Hub points out, and ego is going to rule the day. You know what I mean?
Let me ask you a question though. If they're going to keep Ryan in the face of all this speculation and oversight and let him hire a coach, why would they fire him next year?
They're not going to fire him next year.
No, that's not going to happen. The one concern would come from the interview and who you're interviewing with. Are you going to have a free enough hand to do your job? And we have no reason. I mean, it's certainly. Oh, I shouldn't say that. I don't know if Matt's had a free enough hand or not. As a matter of fact, let me correct myself before. Well, somebody else can too, but I don't think he has. I think that's part of the problem. I reported Thanksgiving week that multiple sources had confirmed for me that it was not solely Matt's decision to make Justin Fields the starting quarterback when he did. I stand by that report. Matt disputed the report publicly in an interesting kind of way. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Sean, but when a guy brings up a report on his own without being asked about it and then says it couldn't be furthest from the truth. I know he didn't mean furthest, he meant further. But just the way he answered the whole thing, it sure felt to me like it was a denial to keep the conversation away and not look bad in front of ownership. But hey, listen, I could be wrong. I'm telling you, the sources are really good. I'm telling you, I've continued to work it since. I'm telling you, it was not Matt's decision on his own. I think that type of thing is a real problem, and that's something that a candidate is going to want to know. But I think that George and Ryan know that too. And so I don't think they're dishonest. I think those are the guidelines under which Matt was working. And I think they're going to have to be different this time. And I think for an opportunity to be the head coach of the Chicago Bears, if I can get some assurance of that, then I think he probably would move past it. I interrupted though. You were saying something about Jim Harbaugh, Kyle?
Was I? No, I was just saying, like, there's a very small set of coaching. I was using him as an example, like of a guy that might say, listen, I got a pretty good thing going on here. I don't really need to take that chance. Most guys, though, one, they've been hoping their entire life to get a chance to be an NFL head coach. And all of those guys, the reason they're even in position to be an NFL head coach is because they have a giant ego and think they can solve any problem in the world.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to cut you off, Kyle. Let me jump in with regards to what you were saying, Hub. I do think it was interesting that Matt Nagy brought that up on his own, going back to whether or not it was his decision to start Fields, because this is a guy who doesn't bring anything up on his own. We saw on Monday, if Justin Fields is going to be your starter for the season finale against the Vikings, wouldn't you come out and just shout that to the world? Like, yeah, we got our guy back, but he had to be asked several questions in, oh, is Justin going to start this week? But I think that's an interesting thread, because if that decision didn't necessarily come from Matt, or didn't 100% come from Matt, how do you factor that into your decision on what to do with Matt Nagy going forward?
Well, that was the column again, ShawLocal.com, guys. I'm yes, shamelessly plugging, but I think that this stuff is worth reading at this point. Has Matt Nagy been judged fairly at all? I mean, go to his press conference this week. The things and this is another column. I guess I'm sorry. I try to write about what he talks about, if that means anything, guys. But he said a couple things on Wednesday he had never said before. He brought up the initial plan, and for the first time, he said the plan was to start Andy Dalton for the entire season and leave, and let Justin Fields learn and have a chance to be prepared. It was the first time he added for the entire season. And I cannot give this man enough credit for the way he's handled himself the last couple of weeks in the face of these questions, one after another. Patient, dignified, classy. I think honest. I have no reason to believe not. And yet you gotta look at every word, because I don't think any of them are accidents, and I think it was him saying again that didn't happen. Didn't say whose fault it was. And so, forced to play a quarterback who wasn't ready. Look at the Cleveland game. There's no way he was ready to play in that game. And then look at the Detroit game. Yeah, they won the game, but go back. I think he threw for 111 yards or something like that. I'm probably off by that, but I know he didn't do much. And then against the Raiders, that's a defensive win. In between the Lions and the Raiders, Matt has to sit there and say, clearly Justin has earned the job. That was ridiculous. Nothing had changed from the initial plan that he just reminded us again on Wednesday was supposed to be for the entire season. So if you accept my belief that he, I don't want to say forced because it's such a strong word, but if he was instructed to let Justin play, at the expense of his plan and the expense of the best chance. Here's a great example of the whole conversation social media thing. Everybody has 20/20 hindsight now, and they see how poorly Andy Dalton has played. And so, what difference would it have been? How would they have won any more games? Would they have been any better? It doesn't work that way, guys. I mean, everything changed, once you went to Justin. Now you've got everything discombobulated. You got problems that we don't know what would have happened. Would they have been a Super Bowl? No, of course not. Would they made the playoffs? You know what, guys? If they just hold a lead with a minute left against Pittsburgh and Baltimore, they're playing for a shot in the playoffs Sunday. I'm not saying it makes them a better team, but that's kind of the reality of all this stuff. So this gets to the question, is Matt being evaluated fairly? Sean, it's a great question. And I won't say nobody, but the majority don't want to hear it because the majority want him fired. But this is where I just feel it's been unfair. You know what my answer is? Yeah, he's being evaluated fairly because, regardless of who the quarterback was, well, even that, you look at where the offense is at. Would the offense be here if it had had the veteran game manager over the last 11, 12, 13 weeks? And so it's a great question. It doesn't change anything. You can't go back. There's going to be a change. Matt still, with whatever parameters he had to work with, he didn't succeed. But Kyle, I see the look on your face. I think it's a great question.
I'm confused, like, with that comment from Matt. I didn't realize he had said that on Wednesday. That the plan was to play Andy Dalton the entire season, because
geez, Sean, I thought he was editing my column. Now what?
I may listen. It's been a long week for all of us.
I was just going to say, took the words out. I have made this hell on everybody, guys. I want to interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you. I cannot thank Kyle and Sean enough. I'll get us back on the subject in a minute, I promise. But you laugh about it because you don't want to cry about it. I mean, this whole going viral stuff is crazy, and it has been impossible to go to work, to do your job, to sleep, to any of that stuff. Now, I'm sure I've taken it a little more personally than these guys, but Sean's had to work double, triple time, because of the mess I made. Kyle probably hasn't had any more sleep than I have. It has been a long week. And guys, I cannot thank you enough for your patience and understanding. I'm guessing that we may have set a few traffic records at the website, so at least there's that, but I promise you it was never the plan. It's not a trade I would make if I could. So thank you very much for all you've done this week. I'm sorry I interrupted, but go ahead, Kyle.
That's all right. That concerns me though, that that doesn't seem like it was, if the plan was to play him all season long or play Andy Dalton all season long, I mean, I never would agree to that because I think that was a bad plan. Justin Fields needed to be on the field. Now week 2 probably was too soon, as we found out, but you would think that they had, if Matt's saying that had to be a plan for everyone, either that or Matt shouldn't have been the head coach going into the season once. Or, if you were having that kind of conflict where Matt was like, no, Andy Dalton needs to start the entire season, and the front office going, no, we need to get Justin Fields like that you would think they had that hammered out at some point before the season started.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been a great follow-up question, Kyle. I wish you'd been on the press conference because I didn't think of that, but I mean, I just assume and believe. I don't assume. I know. I talked to Matt. I talked to these guys. It was the plan from the entire organization going. That was the plan. You don't go through the draft, the off season. We did talk to Ryan immediately following the draft, and again that one time at the start of the season. It was the plan for the entire organization. And what happened is, again, all the chatter, and again, they're not listening to social media either, for the most part, but they know the noise and the chatter that is out there. They do read the legitimate media, I guess. Well, I don't know if there's a better word, but the print, the broadcast stuff, the stuff that we accept as having some credibility, maybe is the way I should put it. And the noise was there too, and so they were hearing it. And one really good source, when I was, trying to get this all hammered out, put it to me in a great way. He, as to why and how this happened. He said, the one thing George and Ted do understand is empty seats. And I think what happened is that, ownership and management got overwhelmed by what they expected was the popularity of it. They saw them win a game in Detroit with Justin, and it was that simple. They thought, hey, if we can win with him, and we can play them, everybody's going to be happy. They may have thought that they knew more football than Matt and Ryan, but it was the plan, and I think, Kyle, just to be fair, it was the plan for the entire season, but over the course of the entire season, as Justin was being developed the proper way in their estimation, because the plan was also for him to have that package and play in every game, that maybe there would have come a time, week 11, week 15, where now they could see that he'd had enough and they could put him out there for extended period of time. So I don't think it was etched in stone, but it certainly was not to make a change week 3.
Yeah, definitely accelerated. Our own John Solly has a question in here, which is actually somewhere I wanted to pivot to as we talked about coaching changes, because you wrote a good column about this the other day, Hub, about the coordinators, and what does Sean Desai's future look like, assuming Nagy is gone? And, you made a good point in the column. There are some coordinators on this team that I think we feel pretty good about. Bill Lazor's done a solid job. Obviously, Chris Tabor is very well respected around the league. Sean Desai, has acquitted himself really well, gotten better throughout the season, and has done it without Khalil Mack for a good portion of it.
Yeah, and John, I owe you a big thanks as well. I know everybody in the company have kind of made things hard this week, and so thank you too. John is one of our coworkers and a super guy, and I think our lead editor in the company, I know our online lead editor. I apologize, guys. I don't know what my job is. I can't be expected.
The titles change over the years.
But John, to your point, I mean, Desai, when guys look at the numbers, look at the performance. Now, again, some of these are getting padded now in garbage time against other bad teams. But at no point this year has the defense not been competitive, and they've done some good things. The resurgence of Robert Quinn, is obviously to the credit of Robert Quinn, but he gets coached too. And you look at the way they've used him and the position they've put him in. I think one of the things we've missed on Robert Quinn is how good he's been against the run. Everybody's focused on the 18 sacks, but he has been a complete player. The continued development of Roquan Smith. Eddie Jackson has had a much better year. He hasn't been Eddie Jackson of 2018.
I was just going to say that Eddie Jackson has consistently gotten better. I mean, if you remember, he was kind of a punching bag in week 1. And since then, he had every once in a while, but he's gotten consistently better.
Guys, the criticism of Eddie is they don't want to hit anybody. He's been flying all over the field the last 3-4 weeks. He's played. So the defense, Desai has done a nice job. And then you lost your defensive MVP. I mean, realistically, you lost him week 5 when he got hurt, in the Raider game. He tried to play through it a couple more weeks after that. So Sean Desai has certainly not done a bad job, and he's young, and he's bright, and he's innovative. And so I think he has a good future, but he got the job after just 7 or 8 years in the league, just 2 years as a position coach. How is he going to be viewed by anybody but Matt Nagy? Is he going to get another coordinator job right away? He's going to have to go back to being a secondary coach. We don't know. Bill Lazor has done a nice job. I think the difference with Bill, though, is that he's a lifer. This is the third team he's coordinated, and he hasn't done anything special. And the offense is still one of the worst in the league. But the guy, Chris Tabor, is one of the more respected special teams coaches in the league going in, and has done a really nice job. And
I mean, if you fire a Chris Tabor, you're going out and looking for a Chris Tabor.
Yeah.
So
if there is a new coach, I would think that Chris is probably in the best position to stay if he wanted to. The question on Bill and Sean, because Bill does have something going for him, they're going to want to keep some continuity with Justin Fields. And that's why I think I wrote in the column that if you're and there's almost always some holdover for continuity and familiarity. And new coaches will come in and look for a couple assistants he can keep. It was rare with Matt because he had the best defensive coordinator in football that he kept Vic, and Vic kept a lot of his staff intact. But that was an unusual situation. I would think that John DeFilippo, if he wants to stay, is probably in the best position because he has been Justin Fields' personal coach, and there's some familiarity there. But Sean, I think in general, getting back to what Kyle specifically asked, I think it's crazy when people say the next head coach has to be an offensive guy or a defensive guy. Everybody's screaming, got to be an offensive guy for Justin. Well, Matt was brought here as an offensive guy. How'd that work out with Mitch and Justin? So that's stupid. It has to be the best potential head coach who you trust to hire the best offensive and defensive coordinators. But if the guy you hire is an offensive guy, unless he's going to, like Matt, try and be his own offensive coordinator, he's going to want to bring his own guy with him and might look more favorably on Sean on the defensive side. If the guy you bring in is a defensive guy, he's probably going to want to bring his own guy with him. That's just the way historically that this has worked.
Those are great points. It comes down to what exactly the new coach is going to want too, on some level at least. The Sean Desai discussion is interesting. I look at that first Vikings game. I think that was one of his best coordinated games. I know it was a loss, but the way that they were able to weather the storm with that basically a backup secondary, and that's the position. Those are the positions he's focused the early part of his career on, is that secondary, and they did a really good job with guys who weren't household names. I think Sean Desai, I can't say this with 100% certainty, obviously, but I feel like he's a guy who would want to stay. He's put so much time and effort into the Bears. He's been here since 2013. He's got young kids. None of these guys want to move, but certainly that is a position, and he seems to be in a position where if he's given the opportunity, I think he would stay. It just comes down to what are there other opportunities out there for him to be a coordinator elsewhere, which I don't know that there necessarily will be.
It probably increases his chances of remaining with the Bears if the front office remains intact, if Ryan Pace comes back, because we've talked about this. The Bears are not going into a rebuild after this season. They're going to plan to compete next year. They have a veteran defense, and they may say, we have the pieces of that defense together. Sean Desai got promoted and did a really good job. Why blow that up and start over? I mean, obviously we need to make some coaching changes, but let's try and convince someone to leave. Let Sean stay on.
What's the trend right now, guys? Everybody wants the bright young, the next up and comer. If you already have him here in Sean, and he has shown some indication that he may be, I think he will certainly be looked upon favorably. Whatever happens here. Beyond that, though, it just the reason you're bringing in the new head coach is to get a fresh start, and you don't know what they're going to have in mind. I think the one other point we should make here that is so often forgotten, it's another thing that just makes me sick, because I will tell you again firsthand with this experience of the last week, people forget that those of us in this business, be it coaches or media, have families, and while this has not really been all that hard on me, my family has paid a price too, and that's the part that makes me the sickest about it. And these coaches, they have wives, they have kids. Sean, I think to your point, I think Sean Desai has 3 young kids. I'm pretty sure that
we've heard them in the back of the Zoom calls a couple times this week.
Yeah, I'm old. You get my puppy, but with him, you get his kids. Families may want to go home. Families may want to go back to South Carolina or Arizona or North Dakota or California, wherever the opportunities are. Others have built homes here, in Chicago, and may want to stay. It does have an impact, and even with head coaching candidates. I can think of 2 instances right off the top of my head where guys had multiple choices and they took jobs because their wives' families were there. And so all of this is the behind the scenes stuff that we never even hear about most often that will have an impact on all this.
Before I think we're just about out of time, and I want to end on Alan's question about potential surprises after he ended up saying after this season ends. But I do want to throw this question up from Kawhi quick.
Kawhi is asking, would the three of us agree that the offensive coaching staff overall is well below average? Fangio had an awesome staff in 2018. I don't see any of Nagy's staff having an upward trajectory. I don't know, based on the conversation we just had, Kawhi, that we would necessarily agree.
Yeah, I think we all disagree there. Or disagree with Kawhi, that is.
Yeah, I think Bill Lazor has gotten himself 3 different coordinator jobs, and the offense has actually operated better under his play calling than it did under Matt. Darnell Mooney has become a really pleasant surprise as a 5th-round receiver. The offensive line is clearly in a better place than it was a while ago.
I like. Sorry to cut you off. I think Mike Furry. The wide receiver room has not been good. But I think Mike Furry's actually done a pretty good job during his tenure in Chicago. I don't think he stays, but I think he's going to find another job pretty quickly.
Yeah, Kawhi, I don't think it's the best staff in the league. I don't think it's the worst staff in the league. I don't think that as a staff in general, it is an exceptional staff. I don't know that other than Sean Desai, we don't even know. The defensive staff was pretty much overhauled this year. These guys only got 1 year. I'm not going to predict what's going to happen for them next. On the offensive side, though, Juan Castillo on the offensive line, Clancy Barone, tight end coach, Bill Lazor, offensive coordinator. These guys are lifers. They're I don't want to say they're at the end of their careers, but they're certainly on the back side of the hill. I don't think their arrow is pointing up at this point. But I think that they could work in the league for some time to come, Sean.
Yeah, certainly. I think all these guys could for some time to come. But when somebody new comes in, they're gonna have to evaluate what's here. And we saw it kind of last year with how many guys from that defensive side decided to leave, and so you got to factor that in too. Are these guys who are even going to want to stay if another opportunity presents itself?
Yeah, Kyle, let me make a quick point here. You look at John DeFilippo and where Justin Fields is at. John DeFilippo is a pretty respected quarterback coach, and he has also been an offensive coordinator. Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, and Zach Wilson are going to finish the year with 3 of the lowest quarterback ratings among rookie quarterbacks in NFL history. They're going to be in competition with guys like Peyton Manning and Troy Aikman, although they're lower, but these are other guys who are talking about this way. Rookie quarterbacks don't play well. That is why we've had this debate and this argument, this conversation all along. And so that also brings down the rest of the offense. And so trying to evaluate the job that these guys have done, in some respects you can. As I said, I think the offensive line has improved. Cole Kmet has certainly improved. Does that mean Clancy Barone's a great coach? It means he hasn't done a bad job. But it's really hard to evaluate these guys because of the way this season went.
All right, well, we're getting on an hour here, so let's wrap it up. Go back to Alan's question about evil twin Kyle here, but he was referring to after this season. What surprise could we see from the Bears? Who wants to start on that?
I got to think about this one for a second.
What would be a surprise from the Bears after this season?
Keeping Matt Nagy?
Well,
that would be the ultimate surprise. Would be keeping Matt Nagy, right?
No change would be a big surprise.
Would be a
I think you go to the next obvious is that if they chose to and were able to retain either Akeem Hicks or Allen Robinson, I would be.
Those are good ones, yeah.
But I'm guessing, guys, Allen is asking us to look more towards the 22 season, and what might happen there.
Can I derail this for a second? Because there was a question earlier that I didn't get to about wide receivers, and when you said Allen Robinson, I'm going to ask your opinion on this. And Sean, you can chime in too. I've only seen it from a single, I think it was an NFL Network personality talking about apparently some friction between the Atlanta Falcons and Calvin Ridley, and that they could both be looking to go their separate ways. And, of course, that starts a trade speculation. So obviously, I guess my question is to Hub, a guy like Calvin Ridley, is that a first rounder, or is that something that's a second or third rounder?
Yeah, guys. I mean, listen, I don't know Calvin Ridley, and he may be the best young man in the world. But when a player basically ends up taking the better half of a season off to work on his mental health, first, I wish him the best, and I certainly hope that he is healthy and in a good place and has a great NFL career. But boy, am I going to be careful before I trade for him. And I mean, the last time the Bears got a wide receiver with mental health issues was with Brandon Marshall. And while he did go to a few Pro Bowls, he also ruined the team. And so, I mean, look at what Antonio Brown just did. And again, I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not taking shots at Antonio Brown.
I'm saying we don't want to put Calvin Ridley.
No, not.
I'm
not.
That. But I know.
Yeah. I'm just making the point that when you get players with these types of issues, and I'm not putting, hey, I didn't make that up. That was the official pronouncement. Calvin Ridley needed
mental health.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, and beyond that, he is a number one receiver, but I don't think I would put him in the class of the top number one receivers. He certainly wasn't Julio Jones, even though he was the heir apparent there. He isn't DeAndre Hopkins. Now, he's a number one receiver and they need one. So I think you look at it the other way, is how cheap could we get him because of this situation? And then do you take the chance? I think that's the way you approach that kind of deal. But I'm guessing at this point, Kyle, and we don't even know, as you said, I haven't heard that one before. I would hope that the Falcons, if it is mental health issues, are more concerned with helping him and getting him back to a good place and getting him back on the field. So, and we all, I think, can agree that we hope that happens. But if they were going to try and deal him based on the situation, I would somebody give him a 3 or a 4? I'm guessing that's and I don't think the Bears have a 3 or a 4. They're in bad shape in the draft this year. I know they still got a 2. They may have 2 2s, but I think other than that, they've only got like 5 picks right now. So they're in a tough spot to make a deal like that.
And one other thing to keep in mind too, Ridley is only under contract for 1 more year.
Yeah. And that's what I would like to say, that my bold prediction or surprise would be that the Bears are going to be very aggressive within the trade market, knowing that this window is kind of open and not going into a rebuild. But I think Hub makes an excellent point that they already have limited draft capital. So trading away more is probably not wise. And I guess based on the reporting, this isn't a surprise, but it is what I expect to happen. What I assumed was going to happen all along, which is the fact that the McCaskies really like Ryan Pace. And I'm not surprised to hear that it is trending towards him remaining with the organization and them bringing someone else in. So I guess that would be my surprise. Maybe a year ago we thought Ryan Pace would have been gone if things didn't go well this season. But I expect him to be here, and I expect him to bring someone else in.
Yeah, guys, I think we probably do have to wrap. I couldn't tell if the clock was when the idiot showed up late started, or if this is the total podcast. But either way, I know we're at the deadline. So it's going to be a very busy couple of weeks, guys. We know that. We didn't get to the game. They are going to Minnesota. They are going to play. I don't know if Kirk Cousins is going to play or not. I haven't really been able to focus too much on what's going on.
He's off the COVID list, so the plan is for him to play.
Okay, well, and that means I may even change the prediction I made on Pro Football Weekly TV when we taped yesterday. But I kind of like the Bears' chances here, just the way they're playing and where the Vikings are playing. You got both teams maybe playing for their coaches' jobs, but I don't really know the mood in Minnesota right now, and I don't know that Zimmer is in quite the jeopardy that Matt is, although there is rampant speculation he could be gone too.
I don't know what the inner workings of their organization is. I do know from Twitter, which is not obviously a great barometer, but the Vikings fans are ready for a change in Minnesota when it comes to Zimmer.
Yeah, I try not to measure these things by what the fans want.
I know.
No, Kyle, I get where you're coming from. You're right. I mean, it is something we have to look at these days, So I don't know where the Vikings players are at. I don't think that they've quit either. I'm not going to accuse them of that, but they have not played as well the last couple of weeks as the Bears players have. And the Bears, really the Vikings are a team that they play well. They've won 5 of the last 7, even with the loss a couple weeks ago. In the game a couple weeks ago, they probably should have won. So and I think, well, now the Vikings did win in Minnesota last week. That was the one win prior to to Monday night a couple weeks ago. But I kind of like the Bears' chances to finish on a win and going out feeling good here. And I'm not going to get into scores. Sean, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you, Hub. I think there's a lot of positives that they can take from that first matchup with the Vikings a couple of weeks ago. If they can just get a little bit more offense, which we have seen the last 2 weeks with Nick Foles and Andy Dalton at quarterback. I think that they're going to win this game by 3 points.
Kyle?
If Justin Fields was playing, I would pick the Bears to win. I just don't know about the offense. Even last week, it did not perform particularly well.
That's very true.
They didn't win that game last week because of their offense. I'm going to take the Vikings to win this game. I think it'll be a close one. I don't think there's going to be a lot of points scored.
Yeah, another topic for a whole podcast that we didn't get to because of my stupidity this week is no, it didn't perform all that well last week. Not nearly as well as it did the week before with Nick Foles at quarterback. And why they went back to Andy Dalton instead of staying with Foles is something I'll also never understand. So, if people still care in a week, we can talk about that. But we should make one more point, guys. They announced on Wednesday that Justin is ready to get back on the field and play with the ankle. He goes on the COVID list Thursday, but that means he couldn't practice Thursday. And he can't practice today. Friday is when we tape, even though it's a walkthrough. So there's been some debate about the wisdom of giving him the last game after missing 3 or 4 weeks. I think if he's 100% healthy, you do. You insisted on having him on the field all year long to learn. Why would you want him to learn here? But now, even if he can get those 2 negative tests between now and Sunday, having had 1 day of practice in 3 weeks, do you put him back out there?
Yes, I would put him out there. As long as, I assume like you'd feel, as long as you feel comfortable, I think the Bears would. I'd put him out there.
I don't necessarily think they would do that, though. I mean, he was back in practice last week, and they still wanted to go with Dalton. I think if he's not practicing, he's probably not playing.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting there's a right or wrong here, guys. I don't even know if I have an opinion. I just think it's a question that you got to look at. He was back in practice last week, but he was limited in practice last week.
Right.
That's why he didn't play. So it'll be interesting to see.
I'll say this. Sorry. I think it depends on his kind of mental state right now. And I'm not saying it's a bad mental, but do you think getting him one more live action will help him mentally going into the offseason? Might have a lot to do with it.
Kyle, I think that there is so much concern about Justin Fields' mental state that it's ridiculous. And I'm not saying you're ridiculous. I understand that it's a question people keep asking. He has shown himself to be a very bright, tough, perseverant young man. I'm not worried about his mental state. The talk about him going out on a good note. How good a note is it going to be? Whatever happens Sunday, is he going to forget the other 11 weeks? So
that's true. That's fair.
It's not much of an issue to me. I think that there was a whole camp, which, as you guys know, I completely disagreed with. I think the best way to teach a rookie quarterback is let him watch and learn and prepare him better for when he's thrown into the fire. But I was in the minority. A whole camp wanted him on the field all year long. I think there is no justification for saying I wanted him all year long, but now I want to sit him down the last week because it might do him harm. That makes no sense to me. So, if he's physically ready to go, you play him. Sean?
Yeah, if he's ready to go and he feels comfortable, he certainly sounds like a guy who wants to be out there. And I think that's maybe what this comes down to. If he is able to get cleared, before they head to Minnesota, if they feel he's ready to go and he wants to go, he's going to go.
All right, guys, listen, we are long, we're late. It's because of me. It has been a long, late week. I want to thank everybody for patience and understanding. And again, I cannot possibly thank Kyle and Sean enough for what they've done to help me get through this week. I want to apologize one more time to anybody that I may have caused issues for during the course of the week. We are going to be busier than ever the next couple of weeks. We think this is a podcast you will not want to miss. And I promise you, I think it's in about 4 weeks. I think the MVP won't be announced until the Super Bowl. But within, whatever time it's announced, we will have a, I suppose, spirited and fun conversation about, my vote and why because I would, love the chance to explain at some point, but that point is just not now. So we will get to it. In the meantime, next week when we come back at 9:30 on Friday morning, and I will be on time, we're going to have a lot to talk about. Who it is and what it is, we don't know, but we're going to have a lot to talk about. So thank you so much for being with us this week. Remember, if you're hearing this as a podcast, you can join it live. You can ask questions, as a number of our friends did this week. We do it 9:30 Chicago time on a StreamYard link that you can find through YouTube. You can get to it by going to Kyle's Twitter account at Kyle Nabors. You can get Sean's at Sean_Hammond. You can go to mine at Hub_Arkush. You have to read a lot of nasty stuff if you go there, but you can go there too, and it'll get you live into the podcast. If you prefer it as a podcast, please go to the App Store on your phone or to shawlocal.com or iTunes and download a subscription so it's delivered automatically. In the meantime, have a great week, everybody, and we will be back next week, and thanks for being with us.